Okay, I think you can guess what my next project is. I've got another Kisae DC to DC charger installation coming up on a 2019 Unity. And I've ordered my 6-gauge pre-made cables, but I do have to cover the ends. And as I said before, you really only need to cover the positive crimp part, but I'm going to cover both of them just because I have the heat shrink and I think it looks nice. I've got the 60 amp circuit breakers. I've got the 120 amp Isolator Relay. I've got the Kisae. This time I'm going to be installing a Xantrex ECHO charge. And I'm also going to be installing the Victron Battery Sense voltage reader, so the person will have a Bluetooth voltage reading through their Victron Connect app. And I've already gone ahead and cut down my my little shelf. This time I cut the legs 2 inches and 3 inches on the back and put their little rubber feet back on. So I've got that all done. All right, so let me unbox this and put the heat shrink on the cables, and we'll come back and talk about how we're going to connect it all. Okay, I want to talk about the Xantrex ECHO charge. I'm going to be installing one of these, but the connectors don't seat. The connectors either don't seat or they don't even fit. Like this one, I can't even get that in. I can't even get these two connectors together. And then on this one, I actually, see, it's not fully seated. I don't know if you can see, but there's still part of the metal blade there at the end, but then it just easily slips off. I even cut off the yellow, the yellow casing to try to make it slide in here better, but it's not fully seating. So I don't know why Xantrex has all these fuses with these silly connectors on them, because I don't think that's really a good connection. So since you have to, buy the crimper and the heat shrink crimper and the heat shrink connectors, we might as well just cut these off and butt splice them so you have a good solid connection. So I'm going to do that, and I'll come back and show you. Another thing I don't like is Xantrex uses 12-gauge wire coming out of the unit, and so you have to use, the yellow butt connectors. But then the wire that are fused, it's only 16-gauge wire. So what I do is I strip the wire off longer, and then I fold it in half. So when you put it in the this 10 to 12 gauge connector, it's a little bit thicker. The other thing I also do is not only do I crimp in the yellow position, but then I go and crimp in the blue position, because this is a smaller wire, so I want to make sure I get a good crimp. So basically I crimp it first in the 10 gauge, in the yellow, and then I go down to the blue to make sure I have a good crimp for that smaller wire in that larger butt connector. Also pay keep a close eye on the connections you're making. Like one wire, one fused wire is all red, and that goes to the all red or the house battery red wire. And then the starter battery is a striped wire coming out of the unit. It is a white and red striped wire, but the fused wire that goes with it is a yellow and red striped wire. So make sure you put, those two together, the red and white stripe and the yellow and red stripe, and then the all red, and then the all red goes together and the all black goes together. All right, I'll finish making those connections. Okay, so now my Xantrex ECHO charge is ready. I've got nice connections, nice splice connections for all these joints, and that's a much stronger setup than what it came with originally. So I recommend you do that so you have an efficient operation out of your ECHO charge, and that you don't have any issues with voltage drop or heat buildup because of the extra added resistance for not having a good connection. Okay, so I'm going to start preparing the Kisae DC to DC charger. And as I said before, I go ahead and remove this cap off the back. You need a little Phillips head screwdriver. But so I'm going to go ahead and undo these and remove this cap, and I'll come back. Okay, so I took this cap off, and I'm going to leave it off because, like I have said in the past, right here is the intake, the air intake for the fans. And you can see the fan. There's one fan. This unit has one fan to cool. So you can see that it takes the air in that underneath, and then it blows out of these fins right here. So I like to remove this because, as you can see, that really cuts the flow, and I want as much airflow across the unit of the Kisae. And that's also why I use this stand underneath the seat base, because I want the most airflow around the unit while it's, in the confined space of the underneath the passenger seat of a Unity. You turn this on, and you have to be careful, because when you're working on this positive channel 3 connection, which is the chassis battery, this is the input. Channel 3 is the input, so this is the chassis battery. Channel 1 is the output. So anyway, so when you're working on this positive terminal, you might accidentally flip that. So always check and make sure you have it on before you try to start up your system. Another thing is this Kisae actually has a remote, and I give people a link to the remote if they want to use that, and it's connected with a phone cord. I actually have the remote, and I put it in my glove compartment, so then when I want to check the what the Kisae is doing, I just pop open my glove compartment and look in, and it's very easy to route the phone cable down underneath the carpet and up the back of the glove box there in the Unity, and put that inside there if you're interested in a remote which gives you a visible display at any time. Okay, so I'm going to get on with hooking this up. Okay, now I cut all my heat shrink. I'm using 1/2-inch heat shrink, and I give you a link to this heat shrink in my description. But basically, I'm going to use it to cover up just the bottom part, just where this crimp is. I definitely want to do it on the positive cables, just to reduce the amount of surface area that is, has voltage. In case something drops while you're working, or just to further protect it from any shorts. Now, I'm also going to do it on the blacks just to make it look nice, but it's not required on black because it's a ground. But if you don't have a heat shrink, or you don't want to buy heat shrink, you can also just use electrical tape and wrap all these positive connections, so they're, covered. And so I'm going to do that and come back. Okay. So, what we're going to do is we're going to pre-wire everything. So when I get to the under the passenger seat of the Unity, things will move pretty quickly. And because the weather is questionable, so I don't want to worry about getting rained on with the door open. So anyway, so prepping like this can, save you a couple of hours, standing over the passenger seat if if you want to do this ahead of time. So what I like to do, and I'm just advising this for, the newbie kind of people out there doing this work, is to label. I can't tell you how many people who have contacted me and asked me questions, and then I explain, channel 3 is the chassis battery and channel 1 is the house battery connections, and they're like, oh my gosh, I hooked them up wrong. I didn't, I guess they didn't pay attention to, the input and the output. Now the input isn't clearly labeled. The output of this Kisae is. So anyway, so I just took some blue painter tape here, and marked chassis battery and house battery. So, you stay focused on the terminals you're working on. And then of course this is your chassis ground. And the same with the 120 amp isolator relay that I use between the Kisae and the chassis battery. So you can add a chassis battery maintainer without worrying about the Kisae turning on and thinking the engine is running. So, this keeps the Kisae isolated from the chassis, from either battery until the ignition comes on. So I marked, the connections here. Number 30 is for the chassis battery. Number 87 is for the Kisae, to the Kisae connection. Number 86 is for the ignition wire, the blue ignition wire that we're going to take off of the isolator delay relay under the passenger seat. And then 80, it's hard to see, 85 is the ground wire. And that we're going to get that ground wire from the ground that we take off of the Isolator Solenoid under the passenger seat. So go ahead and label as much as you want, because that'll keep you from making mistakes. Now I did the same thing on the 60 amp circuit breakers. I labeled house and chassis, and then on the wires I labeled chassis, house, and then of course you have a second chassis because you've got the the Kisae. You have one chassis battery wire that goes to the Kisae and the 87 on the relay, and then you have another wire that goes from 30 to the chassis battery circuit breaker. Okay, so in addition to everything else we've talked about, I'm also going to be installing this Victron Battery Sense, and that is to read the chassis battery voltage, and then I'm going to be hooking up the Xantrex ECHO charge in all the right places on all this stuff. I will point out that the screw head basically is a number 3 Phillips head. So I have a number 3 Phillips head there, and then you're going to need a 10 millimeter and an 11 millimeter socket for the various nuts on these units. And then I've also added a stainless steel washer to the TrueMod and to the house and chassis battery side connections that I'm going to be making, because the relay, 120 amp relay, its terminals are slightly smaller than 1/4 inch, and so these J-tron cables with an 8 millimeter hole are just a little bit too big for the teeth on that nut. So I want more surface area to tighten against, and then the cables that I take off of the Isolator Solenoid in the Unity, they're actually 5/16 of an inch, and this is a 1/4. So again, I want to use a washer so I have, you know, the teeth making good connection to tighten up. So I'll give you a link to those stainless steel washers so you can put them on. Again, I put them on the Isolator Relay and the house and chassis battery wires that I'm going to take off the Isolator Solenoid. This Kisae already has a flat washer, so that's good. It goes with its lock washer, so that's good. And then these machine screws with a lock washer and a flat washer, they work great with these pre-made Victron cables with the 8mm hole. Okay, so now I'm going to start laying all this out and connecting it, and we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, so here we have it. I've connected the 3 ground wires to the negative terminals of the channel 3 chassis battery and of the channel 1 house battery. And then I've connected the negative, connected a ground on the case ground. And I just stuck the ground wires for the Victron Battery Sense and the Echo Charge because I'm going to put those on, and I've left this loose because I'm going to put those on when I get everything in the seat base, in the passenger seat base. So I'm leaving these disconnected for now, and I'm leaving this loose because, you know, I'll do it once I get everything set up in the seat base. Okay, and then as far as the circuit breakers, I have the house circuit breaker, and you can see I have the red house wires connected, and so I'm not going to connect this, but again, when I get everything set up in the underneath the passenger seat, then I'll be putting the house battery on the output positive, which is the house battery connection, and then the same with the chassis battery connection off of the Isolator Solenoid. I'll be putting it, the Isolator Relay, I'll be putting it on the positive connection of the chassis battery. I'll be putting it there when I get under the seat. So, so the house circuit breaker is done with its single house wire. I've also made the house battery connection on the Xantrex from the Xantrex inverter, so that's going to be connected. It'll get its power straight from the house battery. And then, so that's done. And like I said, when I get under the passenger seat and take out the Isolator Solenoid, I'll be removing the house cable, house battery cable from the Isolator Solenoid, and I'll be putting it here. The same on the chassis battery. I'll remove the chassis battery cable from the Isolator Solenoid, and I'll put it here. So on the chassis battery, I've already connected this chassis battery Victron cable, 6-gauge cable. I've connected the power to the Xantrex Battery Sense voltage reader for the chassis battery. I've connected the striped wire from the yellow and red stripe. I've connected the striped wire from the Echo Charge, which is for the starter battery or the chassis battery. So I've made those connections on here. Now I ended up using a stainless steel washer. I had to add a stainless steel washer to both this connection on the circuit breaker, and the same for the house, because the ring terminals for the Xantrex Echo Charge and the Victron Battery Sense, they're so large that I needed stainless steel washer so I could have a good surface area for the lock nut to tighten up. So you need stainless steel washers for both terminals on both circuit breakers, and extra stainless steel washers on the Isolator Relay battery connection. So that's 6 stainless steel washers. And I give you a link to those in the description. Okay, so from the chassis battery, we ran the cable to the chassis battery connection of the Isolator Relay, which is terminal number 30. And then we run a second 6-gauge chassis battery wire from terminal 87, which goes to the Kisae. And as I said, when I get under there, I'll be adding this battery here to the chassis battery connection of the Kisae. And then as far as the Isolator relay goes, I made up 2 cables. Now I give you links to 16-gauge blue and black wire, but I had this black wire, so I'm just reusing it. So I put connectors, spade connectors, female spade connectors on both ends. I've marked one black cable with blue tape so I can remember that this is the ignition signal wire, which is terminal 86, and the ground wire is terminal 85. And then on the other end of these wires, I added a blue butt splice, and I marked G and I on the ends of them, so I would make sure I am clear about my connections. And so I'll be making these again when I get under the passenger seat, and the same with the ignition wire. I put an I on each end so I wouldn't get them mixed up once I get under the passenger seat. So I will simply cut off the blue wire from the ignition, from the Isolator Relay delay little module under the seat base, and I'll be butt splicing that blue wire to this blue wire. And then I'm going to be reusing the ground wire that I take off of the Isolator Solenoid. It's a white ground wire. I'm going to butt splice it to this. So this will be the ground for my Isolator relay. Okay, so now all my connections are made, and I am ready for my friend to come tomorrow, and we will get under the passenger seat of her 2019 Unity, and we will place all this stuff and make all the connections. So this completes my prep video. So I encourage people to do this prep work so you have everything, so you've got the time to do things right and think out how you want it. And then when you get under the passenger seat base, your connections will go much easier because you've taken this extra time to complete your connections early and mark your cables and, prepare for success when you get under the passenger seat. There are some that may choose to use a Victron Orion TR Smart 18 amp battery charger for the chassis battery maintainer. So here's a diagram of how you would hook that up. Here's a picture someone sent me. They used the 18 amp Victron Orion TR as their chassis battery maintainer and mounted it on the sidewall instead of the Xantrex ECHO charge. And here are the settings for the Victron Orion.